The day my daughter told me I couldn't see my grandkids anymore, something inside me shattered. I kept quiet. I didn't want to fight. But as the days passed, I realized this wasn't just distance. And that's when I knew I had to do something.
The day my daughter told me I couldn't see my grandkids anymore, something inside me shattered. I stood there in her doorway, holding a bag of freshly baked cookies, chocolate chip, Emma's favorite, and watched as Sarah's face hardened into something I barely recognized. This was the same little girl I'd raised alone after her father left, the same child I'd worked 2 jobs to put through college. Now she was blocking the entrance to her home like I was a stranger. "Mom, I think it's best if you don't come around for a while," she said, her voice cold and rehearsed. Behind her, I could hear Emma and little Jacob playing, their laughter cutting through me like glass. "What do you mean? Sarah, what's going on?" My hands trembled as I held those cookies, still warm from my oven. You're too much. The kids don't need your old-fashioned ideas. And frankly, neither do I." She started closing the door. "David and I have discussed this. We need space." David, her husband. I'd never seen eye to eye with him, but I'd tried. Lord knows I'd tried. Ever since they moved to that upscale neighborhood in Riverside Heights, he'd been different with me. Colder, more dismissive. "Can I at least say goodbye to them?" My voice cracked. "They're busy. I'll tell them you stopped by." The door clicked shut. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, staring at that closed door. A door that had always been open to me. Through the window, I could see Emma running past, her pigtails bouncing. She didn't even know I was there. I kept quiet that first week. I didn't want to make things worse. I thought maybe Sarah just needed time, that whatever was bothering her would pass. I'd raised her to be strong, independent, maybe too independent. But when I tried calling, she wouldn't answer. My texts went unread. I drove by the house twice, hoping to catch the kids playing in the yard. Nothing. It was like I'd been erased. The second week, I got a letter, an actual letter, delivered by certified mail. My hands shook as I opened it. "Cease and desist from all contact with our family. Any further attempts will be considered harassment." Harassment? I'd changed Sarah's diapers, walked her through her first heartbreak, held her hand through her father's abandonment, and now I was a harasser. That's when I realized this wasn't just distance. She wanted me gone, permanently. And that's when I knew I had to do something. I'd spent my whole life avoiding conflict, keeping the peace, bending to make others comfortable. I'd let Sarah's father walk away without a fight. I'd bitten my tongue through years of David's subtle disrespect. But this, my grandchildren, this was different. I sat at my kitchen table that night, the house feeling emptier than it ever had. On my fridge were drawings Emma had made me, a stick figure grandmother with a crown, because she said I was the queen of hugs. On my phone were videos of Jacob's first steps, taken right here in my living room while Sarah was at work, and I was watching him. I'd been there for every birthday, every skinned knee, every bedtime story. I'd been the one Sarah called when she was overwhelmed, when she needed a break, when she needed someone who loved those kids unconditionally. How does a grandmother become the enemy? I poured myself a cup of tea and made a decision. I wasn't going to let this go quietly into the night. If Sarah wanted me out of those children's lives, she was going to have to explain why, not just to me, but to someone who could enforce fairness. That night, I barely slept. But when morning came, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I picked up the phone and called someone I never thought I'd have to call, a family lawyer. "I need to fight for my grandchildren," I told her, "and I need to win." The lawyer's office smelled like leather and old books, the kind of place that felt both intimidating and safe at the same time. Margaret Chen sat across from me, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the cease-and-desist letter. She was in her 50s, with silver streaks in her black hair and a reputation for taking on cases other lawyers wouldn't touch. "How long has it been since you've seen your grandchildren?" she asked. 3 weeks tomorrow. Every day felt like a year. She set the letter down and looked at me with kind but serious eyes. "Mrs. Patterson, call me Helen. Helen, I need you to understand something. Grandparents' rights cases are difficult. In most states, parents have almost absolute authority over who sees their children. The law presumes they're acting in the child's best interest. My stomach dropped. So you're saying I have no rights? I'm saying we need to prove that you had a significant, established relationship with Emma and Jacob, and that cutting off that relationship would harm them. She leaned forward. Tell me about your relationship with your grandchildren. I took a breath and began. I told her about the 3 days a week I'd watched them since they were born, how I'd been there when Emma said her first word, Nana, how Jacob still asked for my potato soup when he was sick. I told her about the overnight visits, the holidays, the way Emma called me every time she learned something new at school because she wanted to share it with me first. Margaret took notes, nodding occasionally. And your relationship with your daughter? When did it start deteriorating? That was harder to pinpoint. After she married David, things changed. Slowly at first. He'd make comments about how I spoiled the kids or how my old ways weren't helpful. Sarah started pulling back, canceling visits, making excuses. I paused, but she still needed me when it was convenient, when she needed a babysitter or when the kids were sick. And the sudden cutoff, any incident that triggered it? I thought back to that last visit before everything fell apart. There was a disagreement. David wanted to enroll Emma in some elite private school 2 hours away. I mentioned that it seemed far, that she'd be away from her friends and family. He took it as criticism. I met Margaret's eyes. But I wasn't rude. I wasn't interfering. I was just being a grandmother. Margaret set down her pen. Helen, I'll be honest with you. This won't be easy. We'll need documentation, witnesses, proof of your relationship with the children. We'll need to show the court that you've been a consistent, positive presence in their lives. I have that. I have everything. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos. Hundreds of them. Videos of birthday parties I'd thrown, school plays I'd attended, ordinary Tuesdays at the park. She scrolled through them, her expression softening. This is good. This is very good. She looked up at me. But you need to be prepared. Sarah and David will fight this. They'll say you're overbearing, that you undermine their parenting, that the children are fine without you. They might say worse. Let them. The words came out stronger than I felt. Those children love me, and I love them. I won't let them grow up thinking their grandmother abandoned them. If you're a grandparent facing something similar, you're not alone. Where is this happening to you? Drop your city name in the comments. Sometimes knowing others understand makes all the difference. The first step was gathering evidence, and I threw myself into it like my life depended on it. Because, in a way, it did. I spent days organizing years of photographs into chronological folders. Emma's first birthday, with cake smeared all over her face, and my living room transformed into a princess wonderland. Jacob's baptism, where I'd held him the entire ceremony because he'd only stop crying for me. Every holiday, every milestone, every ordinary moment that made up the fabric of our relationship. Margaret had given me a list of what we needed, phone records showing our regular communication, testimonies from people who'd witnessed my relationship with the kids, any documentation of the time I'd spent caring for them. The phone records were easy, years of daily calls and texts with Sarah, and recently, the sudden silence. It was eerie seeing it in black and white, the way our communication had just stopped. The testimonies were harder. I started with my neighbor, Patricia, who'd known Emma and Jacob since they were born. She'd seen them at my house constantly, playing in my yard, helping me garden. Of course I'll testify, Patricia said when I asked her. She was in her 70s, a retired teacher with a sharp mind and a warm heart. Those babies love you. Everyone can see it. But when I asked my friend Carol, someone I'd known for 20 years, she hesitated. Helen, I want to help, but Sarah is going to be furious. What if this damages your relationship with her even more? Carol, there is no relationship anymore. She's cut me off completely. I tried to keep the hurt out of my voice. I'm not trying to take her children away. I just want to see them. She agreed, reluctantly. I reached out to Emma's kindergarten teacher, Miss Rodriguez, who'd seen me at every school event, every parent-teacher conference, because Sarah often couldn't make it due to work, and I'd go in her place. I remember you, Miss Rodriguez said when I called. Emma used to draw pictures of you all the time. She called you her best friend. Past tense. It hit me like a punch. Would you be willing to write a letter for the court, explaining how involved I was in Emma's life? There was a long pause. Mrs. Patterson, I sympathize with your situation, but I have to maintain neutrality with all families. If I take sides, it could affect my relationship with Emma's parents. I understood, but it still stung. One more door closing. The hardest part was going through my calendar, documenting every single day I'd cared for the kids. Margaret needed dates, times, proof that I'd been a consistent caregiver, not just a visiting grandmother. I pulled out 5 years of calendars, both paper and digital. Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. Those were my days with Emma and Jacob while Sarah worked. I'd marked them all. Doctor's appointments I'd taken them to, school pickups, sick days I'd covered. One entry stopped me cold. Jacob's first day of preschool. Nana takes him. Sarah had written that in my calendar herself, with a heart next to it. Back when I was still welcome. Back when I was family. I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to cry. Then I kept working. Margaret reviewed everything I'd gathered. This is substantial, Helen. You weren't just a grandmother. You were a primary caregiver at times. That strengthens our case considerably. So, we can win? She gave me a measured look. We can fight, and we have a real chance. She paused. But you need to prepare yourself for what comes next. Once we file, this becomes public. Your daughter will know you're taking legal action. She already knows I'm not going away quietly. I thought of that cease-and-desist letter, filed away in my drawer like a piece of my heart that had been ripped out and formalized. File it. The process server delivered the papers to Sarah's house on a Thursday morning. I know because David called me 20 minutes later, and for the first time in months, I heard his voice, full of rage and something else. Fear, maybe. What the hell do you think you're doing? He shouted before I could even say hello. You're suing us? You're actually suing your own daughter? I kept my voice calm, though my hands were shaking. I'm not suing you, David. I'm petitioning for grandparents' visitation rights. There's a difference. This is insane. You're insane. Sarah's in tears right now because her own mother is dragging her to court. That hit hard, but I didn't back down. I've been in tears for months because my daughter cut me out of her life for no reason. Put Sarah on the phone. She doesn't want to talk to you. Then tell her I'll see her in court. I hung up before he could respond, before he could hear my voice break. The phone rang again immediately. I didn't answer. It rang 6 more times that day. I didn't answer any of them. That night I got a text from Sarah. The first communication in over a month. I can't believe you're doing this. You're supposed to be my mother. How could you betray me like this? I stared at that message for a long time. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, typing and deleting responses. Finally, I wrote, I love you, and I love Emma and Jacob. I always will. But love doesn't mean accepting being erased from their lives without even knowing why. She didn't respond. The next day, Margaret called. They've hired a lawyer, Richard Stevenson. He's tough and he's expensive. They're taking this seriously. Good. So am I. Over the next few weeks, the discovery process began. Both sides had to share information. Emails, texts, any documentation related to my relationship with the children, and Sarah's reasons for cutting off contact. That's when things got ugly. Sarah's lawyer submitted a document claiming I was emotionally unstable and had boundary issues. They said I'd been overstepping as a grandmother, trying to parent the children instead of respecting Sarah and David's authority. I read those words in Margaret's office, my hands trembling with anger. This is a lie. I know, Margaret said gently. This is what they do. They'll try to paint you as the problem. We expected this, but I hadn't expected it. Not really. Not from Sarah. They submitted cherry-picked text messages. Ones where I'd offered advice about Emma's tantrum or suggested Jacob might be getting sick. Taken out of context, they made me look controlling. They didn't include Sarah's responses. Thanks, Mom. You're right. Or, what would I do without you? They found a witness, too. David's sister, Melissa, who claimed I'd once said Sarah was too lenient with the children. I remembered that conversation. It had been a joke, said with a laugh at a family barbecue. Now it was evidence of my interference. This is character assassination, I told Margaret. Yes, and now we fight back. We submitted our evidence. The calendar showing years of childcare, the photos, the videos, Patricia's testimony about seeing me with the children constantly, Carol's statement about how devoted I was as a grandmother. And then Margaret found something crucial in the discovery documents. Helen, look at this. She showed me an email chain between Sarah and David from 6 months ago. David, your mom is over here too much. The kids are starting to prefer her. We need to set boundaries. Sarah, she's just being helpful. She loves them. David, it's undermining us as parents. I want you to limit her visits. My heart sank as I read through the exchange. It went on for weeks, with David pushing and Sarah resisting, until gradually she stopped resisting. "This isn't about you being a bad grandmother," Margaret said. "This is about control. David wanted you out, and he convinced Sarah to go along with it. I'd suspected it, but seeing it in writing made it real. And somehow, that made it hurt more." The court date was set for October 15th, exactly 4 months after Sarah had shut that door in my face. I didn't sleep the night before. I kept imagining walking into that courtroom, seeing Sarah across the aisle, having to relive our family's breakdown in front of strangers. Margaret met me outside the courthouse at 8:30 a.m. It was a gray morning, the kind where the sky matches your mood. "Remember," she said as we walked up the steps, "stay calm, tell the truth, and let me handle the legal arguments. You're here to show the judge who you are, a loving grandmother who deserves to be in her grandchildren's lives." The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, more intimate. Somehow that made it worse. Sarah and David were already there with their lawyer Stevenson, a man in his 50s with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Sarah wouldn't look at me. She stared straight ahead, her jaw tight, David's hand on her shoulder. My daughter looked thinner than I remembered, dark circles under her eyes. She looked exhausted, miserable, and still, she wouldn't look at me. All rise for the Honorable Judge Andrea Martinez. Judge Martinez was a woman in her mid-60s with kind eyes and an air of no-nonsense authority. She reviewed the case file briefly, then looked up at both parties. "I've read the petitions and responses from both sides," she said. "This court takes grandparent visitation cases very seriously. The law in this state recognizes that children can benefit from relationships with extended family members, but it also respects parents' rights to make decisions for their children." She looked directly at me. "Mrs. Patterson, this is your petition. Let's hear your case." Margaret stood. "Your Honor, my client isn't here to challenge her daughter's parenting or to overstep boundaries. She's here because a significant, loving relationship with her grandchildren was severed abruptly and without justification. For 5 years, Helen Patterson was a primary caregiver for Emma and Jacob. She provided childcare 3 days a week, attended every school event, every birthday, every milestone. She wasn't just present, she was essential to these children's lives. She presented the evidence, the photos, the calendars, the testimonies. She showed videos of Emma hugging me, calling me her best friend, Jacob's first steps, taken in my living room while I cheered him on. I watched Judge Martinez's face as she reviewed the materials. Her expression was carefully neutral, but I thought I saw something soften in her eyes when she watched the video of Emma's 5th birthday party, the one I'd thrown at my house because Sarah was working a double shift. "Your Honor," Margaret continued, "the sudden termination of this relationship has been devastating not just for Mrs. Patterson, but potentially for the children. Research shows that children benefit from strong relationships with grandparents, emotionally, developmentally, and socially. Cutting off that relationship without cause can be harmful." Then it was Stevenson's turn. "Your Honor, while Mrs. Patterson clearly loves her grandchildren, love alone doesn't grant legal rights. My clients have made a parenting decision, albeit a difficult one, that they believe is in their children's best interest. Mrs. Patterson has a history of overstepping boundaries, offering unsolicited advice, and undermining my client's parenting decisions." He presented their evidence, the text messages, Melissa's testimony, a statement from Sarah claiming I'd made her feel inadequate as a mother. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and tell the judge that every piece of advice had been requested, that every moment of interference had been Sarah asking me for help and then resenting me for giving it. But Margaret had told me to stay quiet, so I did. "Furthermore," Stevenson continued, "my clients have concerns about Mrs. Patterson's emotional stability. Her insistence on maintaining contact despite being asked repeatedly to step back suggests an inability to respect boundaries." "That's not true," I whispered to Margaret. "I know," she whispered back. "We'll get our chance." Judge Martinez called for a recess. "I want to review all the evidence more thoroughly. We'll reconvene in 1 hour." The hour felt like a lifetime. I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, unable to eat the sandwich Margaret had brought me. My stomach was in knots, my mind replaying every moment of the hearing so far. Patricia found me there. She'd been in the courtroom, waiting to testify if needed. "Helen, breathe," she said, sitting next to me. "You're doing the right thing." Am I? Maybe they're right. Maybe I did overstep. Maybe I... Stop it. Patricia's voice was firm. "I've known you for 15 years. I've seen you with those children. You're not some overbearing grandmother trying to control everyone. You're a woman who loves her family and got pushed out for no good reason. I wanted to believe her. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Martinez looked even more serious than before. I've reviewed the evidence from both sides, she said. And I have some questions. She looked at Sarah and David. Mr. and Mrs. Donovan, you claim that Mrs. Patterson overstepped boundaries and undermined your parenting. Can you provide specific examples beyond the text messages already submitted? Sarah's lawyer whispered something to her. She stood up, her voice quiet. She would give the kids sugar before dinner when I asked her not to. She'd let them stay up past bedtime. She'd tell them stories about my childhood that I didn't want them to hear. My heart broke. Those were her reasons? Cookies before dinner? Staying up an extra 30 minutes to read another chapter? Sharing memories of when she was young and we were close? Judge Martinez made a note. Mrs. Donovan, did you ever have a conversation with your mother about these concerns before cutting off contact? Sarah hesitated. I tried, but she didn't listen. That's not true, Your Honor, I said before I could stop myself. Judge Martinez looked at me. Mrs. Patterson, you'll have your chance to testify. Margaret stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call Mrs. Patterson to the stand. The next 30 minutes were the hardest of my life. Margaret asked me questions about my relationship with the children, and I answered honestly. Yes, I'd given them cookies sometimes. Yes, I'd let bedtime slide on special occasions. Yes, I'd told Emma stories about her mother's childhood, because Sarah used to love those stories, back when we were still close. Did your daughter ever tell you directly that these things bothered her? Margaret asked. She'd mention things casually. Mom, you're spoiling them? Or Mom, they're hyper after visiting you. But she'd say it with a smile, like she was teasing me. I never thought... I stopped, my voice catching. I never thought it was serious enough that she'd want me out of their lives completely. Your Honor, Margaret continued, the evidence shows that my client was following the same grandparenting approach that millions of grandparents use, showing love through small indulgences and special treatment. Nothing she did was harmful or dangerous. She wasn't teaching the children bad values or putting them at risk. She was being a grandmother. Then Stevenson cross-examined me. Mrs. Patterson, isn't it true that you told your daughter she was making a mistake by enrolling Emma in Riverside Academy? I expressed concern about the distance. Yes or no, Mrs. Patterson? Yes, I was concerned. And isn't it true that you showed up at their house unannounced on multiple occasions? I stopped by, yes, to drop off food or gifts for the children. The way family does. The way family does, he repeated, his tone mocking. Even after you were asked to call first? I hesitated. There had been one time, maybe two, where Sarah had mentioned she'd prefer if I called before coming over, but it had never seemed like a serious boundary, more like a passing comment. I may have stopped by once or twice without calling, but Sarah never told me it was a problem, because she was trying to be polite, Stevenson said, trying to avoid conflict with her own mother, until finally the burden became too much. I looked at Sarah then, really looked at her. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her face, but she still wouldn't meet my eyes. After my testimony, the judge called for another recess, this time to speak privately with Emma and Jacob. The children are old enough to express their feelings, Judge Martinez explained. I'll meet with them individually in chambers, without either parent or grandparent present. I want to understand their perspective. My heart raced. Would Emma even remember me after these months apart? Would Jacob, who was only 4? Margaret touched my arm. This is good, Helen. If the children express love for you, missing you, it strengthens our case considerably. But what if they didn't? What if David had turned them against me? Children are so easily influenced. The wait was agony. Sarah and David disappeared into a conference room with their lawyer. I stayed in the hallway with Margaret and Patricia, watching the clock tick forward with painful slowness. 30 minutes passed, then 45. Finally, a clerk emerged. The judge is ready to reconvene. Back in the courtroom, Judge Martinez's expression was unreadable. She had notes in front of her, pages of them. I've spoken with both children, she began, and I want to share some of what they told me, as it's relevant to this case. My hands gripped the edge of the table. Emma, who is 6 years old, told me she misses her Nana very much. She asked me why she can't visit anymore. She said, and I quote, "Nana makes the best cookies, and she doesn't get mad when I make mistakes." She mentioned that she used to call Mrs. Patterson every day after school to tell her about her day. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. Jacob, who is 4, had less to say. He's young, but when I asked him about his Nana, his face lit up. He told me about your potato soup, Mrs. Patterson. He said it makes his tummy feel better when he's sick. He asked if he could see you soon. Judge Martinez looked at Sarah and David. Mr. and Mrs. Donovan, your children clearly have a strong bond with Mrs. Patterson. They expressed no fear of her, no discomfort, no negative feelings whatsoever. In fact, both children seemed confused and sad about why they can't see their grandmother anymore. David leaned forward to whisper to his lawyer, but Judge Martinez held up her hand. I'm not finished. Emma also told me something else. She glanced at her notes. She said that her daddy told her Nana was too busy to visit anymore, that Nana had other things to do. My breath caught. They'd lied to her. They'd made Emma think I'd abandoned her. Your Honor, Stevenson stood quickly. Children that age often misunderstand. Mr. Stevenson, I've been a family court judge for 19 years. I know how to interview children. Her voice was sharp. Emma was very clear. She believes her grandmother chose not to see her anymore. That's a very different narrative from what your clients claimed. That Mrs. Patterson was overbearing and needed boundaries. Sarah was crying harder now, her shoulders shaking. David's face had gone pale. Judge Martinez continued, what I'm seeing here is not a case of an overbearing grandmother who can't respect boundaries. What I'm seeing is a grandmother who had an essential role in her grandchildren's lives being suddenly and completely removed, with the children being told lies about why she's no longer around. Your Honor, if I may... Stevenson tried again. You may not. Judge Martinez's tone left no room for argument. I'm going to take a brief recess to review the law and prepare my ruling. We'll reconvene in 15 minutes. Those 15 minutes felt both endless and far too short. When we returned, Judge Martinez had a formal document in front of her. I've made my decision, she said, and I want to be clear about my reasoning, because this affects not just the adults in this room, but 2 young children who deserve to have loving people in their lives. Judge Martinez adjusted her reading glasses and looked directly at both parties. In the state of California, she began, grandparents do not have automatic rights to visitation with their grandchildren. The law presumes that parents act in their children's best interests. However, the law also recognizes that in some circumstances, maintaining a relationship with grandparents serves the children's welfare. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The standard I must apply is this. Has Mrs. Patterson established that she had a substantial pre-existing relationship with the children? And would denying that relationship harm the children? She looked down at her notes. Based on the evidence presented, the answer to both questions is yes. Mrs. Patterson was not a casual visitor in these children's lives. For 5 years, she provided regular childcare. She attended school events, medical appointments, and was present for major milestones. The photographs, videos, and testimony from witnesses confirm this. More importantly, my conversations with Emma and Jacob confirm that they love their grandmother and are confused and hurt by her absence. I gripped Margaret's hand under the table. However, Judge Martinez continued, and my stomach dropped. I also must consider the parents' concerns. Mr. and Mrs. Donovan have a right to set boundaries for their children's lives. If Mrs. Patterson was genuinely undermining their parenting in harmful ways, that would be a legitimate reason to limit contact. But, she looked at Sarah and David, the evidence doesn't support that. What I see instead are minor disagreements about parenting styles, the kind that happen in every family. An extra cookie before dinner is not child endangerment. Staying up 30 minutes past bedtime occasionally is not harmful. Sharing family stories is not traumatic. David's lawyer whispered urgently to him, but David just stared at the table. What troubles me most, Judge Martinez said, her voice growing stern, is that you told the children their grandmother was too busy for them. You led them to believe they were abandoned. That, Mr. and Mrs. Donovan, is harmful. Children internalize rejection. Emma is 6 years old, and she thinks her Nana doesn't want to see her anymore. The emotional damage of that belief far exceeds any damage from an extra bedtime story. Sarah was openly sobbing now. Therefore, Judge Martinez announced, I am granting Mrs. Patterson's petition for grandparent visitation rights. The order will be as follows. Mrs. Patterson will have supervised visitation with Emma and Jacob for the first month, 2 hours every Saturday afternoon, with a neutral supervisor present. This is to ensure a smooth transition. My chest felt tight. Supervised? But at least it was something. After the first month, assuming the visits go well, and I have no reason to believe they won't, visitation will become unsupervised. Mrs. Patterson will have the children every other Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and one weekday afternoon per week for 3 hours. Margaret squeezed my hand. We'd won. Not everything I'd wanted, but we'd won. Additionally, Judge Martinez added, I am ordering family counseling for Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Donovan. You need to repair this relationship, not just for your sakes, but for those children. They need their mother and grandmother to work together, not against each other. She looked at Sarah with something like compassion. Mrs. Donovan, I understand that navigating family dynamics is complicated, but cutting off a loving grandmother who had done nothing to harm your children was not the answer. Your children need all the love they can get in this world, not less of it. Then she turned to me. Mrs. Patterson, you've been given an opportunity to rebuild your relationship with your grandchildren. I trust you'll use that opportunity wisely. Remember that Sarah and David are the parents. You can disagree with their choices, but you must respect their authority. Can you do that? I stood up, my voice clear despite my tears. Yes, Your Honor. I just want to be in their lives. I'll respect whatever boundaries they need. Judge Martinez nodded. Then we're done here. The clerk will provide you with the formal visitation order. The first supervised visit will be scheduled within 1 week. She brought down her gavel. Court is adjourned. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Sarah stood up abruptly and rushed out of the courtroom, David following her. I wanted to follow them, to say something, anything, but Margaret held me back. Let them go, she said gently. Give them time to process this. You'll see the children soon. That's what matters. I nodded, but my eyes stayed on the door Sarah had disappeared through. I'd won the legal battle, but I'd lost something too. The first supervised visit was scheduled for the following Saturday at a community center in downtown Riverside. I arrived 30 minutes early, my hands full of carefully chosen gifts, a book for Emma about a brave princess, a toy truck for Jacob that I knew he'd love. Margaret had advised me to keep it simple, not to overwhelm them after months apart. The supervisor was a woman named Linda, a social worker in her 40s with a kind smile. She explained the rules. I could play with the children, talk with them, give them the gifts, but I couldn't make any negative comments about their parents, couldn't ask them questions about why we'd been apart, couldn't make promises about the future until the court order was finalized. Just be yourself, Linda said. Be the grandmother they remember. At exactly 2 p.m., the door opened. Sarah and David walked in with Emma and Jacob. Emma saw me first. Her eyes went wide, and for a heart-stopping moment I thought she might not remember me. Then she screamed, "Nana!" and ran across the room, launching herself into my arms. I caught her and held on tight, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, feeling her small arms around my neck. She was taller than I remembered, heavier. 4 months is a lifetime when you're 6. I missed you so much, she said into my shoulder. Why didn't you come see me? I missed you too, sweetheart. So much. I pulled back to look at her face, cupping her cheeks. I'm here now. I'm always going to be here. Jacob was more hesitant. He hung back, clutching David's hand, studying me with his big brown eyes. He was so much bigger than I remembered, too. When had he gotten so tall? I knelt down to his level. Hi, Jacob. Do you remember Nana? He nodded slowly. You make soup. I laughed through my tears. I do make soup. Your favorite potato soup. Would you like to come give Nana a hug? He thought about it for a long moment, then let go of David's hand and walked over to me. His hug was tentative at first, then he squeezed tight. I missed you, Nana. I missed you too, buddy. Every single day. I looked up at Sarah over the children's heads. She was crying, her hand over her mouth. For a moment, our eyes met. Really met. For the first time in months. Thank you for bringing them, I said quietly. She nodded but didn't speak. David put his arm around her shoulders, and they turned to leave. We'll be back in 2 hours, David said stiffly to Linda, and then they were gone, and it was just me, Emma, Jacob, and Linda in that small community room. Those 2 hours flew by faster than any time in my life. We read books together, Emma sitting on my lap like she always used to. Jacob showed me how he could count to 20 now. He'd only known up to 10 before. They told me about school, about their new bedrooms, about a cat they'd named Mittens. They didn't ask why I'd been gone. Children live in the present in a way adults can't. They were just happy I was there now. When Sarah and David returned to pick them up, Emma clung to me. When can I see you again, Nana? Next Saturday, I promised, smoothing her hair. Same time, and then every Saturday after that. Every Saturday forever. Her eyes were hopeful. Every Saturday forever, I confirmed. The following month passed in a blur of supervised visits. Each one was precious, each one healing something inside me. Emma started bringing me drawings from school again. Jacob asked me to teach him how to make cookies. Linda's reports to the court were glowing. The relationship is clearly loving and appropriate. I see no reason why supervision needs to continue. After the 4th visit, the judge made it official. Unsupervised visitation approved. 6 months after the court ruling, Emma and Jacob were at my house for their regular Saturday visit. We were in the kitchen making cookies. Chocolate chip, always chocolate chip, when Emma looked up at me with flour on her nose and asked the question I'd been dreading. "Nana, why didn't Mommy want us to see you?" Jacob paused mid-stir, waiting for my answer. Even at 4, he understood more than we gave him credit for. I took a breath. Margaret and the family counselor we'd been seeing had prepared me for this moment. "Tell the truth," they'd said, "but make it age-appropriate. Don't blame anyone." "Well," I said carefully, sitting down at the table so I was at their level. "Sometimes grown-ups get confused about what's best. Your mommy and daddy thought that maybe Nana was visiting too much, and they wanted to do things their own way. They weren't trying to be mean. They were trying to be good parents. But we wanted to see you," Emma said, her voice small. "I know, sweetheart, and that's why I went to court, to explain to a judge that you and I love each other, and that it's important for families to spend time together, even when there are disagreements." "Did Mommy get in trouble?" Jacob asked, concerned. "No, buddy. Nobody got in trouble. The judge just helped us find a way for everyone to be happy. Now you get to see Mommy and Daddy and me." Emma thought about this for a moment, then nodded and went back to mixing the dough. Crisis averted, at least for now. But the bigger reconciliation, the one with Sarah, was taking longer. The court-ordered family counseling had been awkward at first. Sarah barely spoke in the first 3 sessions, sitting with her arms crossed while the therapist, Dr. Morrison, gently prodded us to communicate. "Sarah," Dr. Morrison said in our 4th session, "your mother has apologized for any times she overstepped boundaries. Can you help her understand what those moments felt like for you?" Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then, finally, it felt like she was better at being a mom than I was. When the kids ran to her first, when they asked for her instead of me, it made me feel like I was failing. My heart broke. "Sarah, you're an incredible mother. I never meant to. I know you didn't mean to." Her voice cracked. But David kept pointing it out. He'd say things like, "The kids like your mom more than us," or "She's undermining everything we're trying to do." And after a while, I started to believe him. I started to resent you for being so good at it. "Being a grandmother is easier than being a parent," I said softly. "I get to give them back at the end of the day. I get to be the fun one because you're doing all the hard work, the discipline, the structure, the everyday grind. That doesn't make you less. It makes you everything." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw my little girl again. Not the angry, distant woman who'd shut me out, but the daughter I'd raised, the one who used to tell me everything. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I cut you out. I was overwhelmed and scared, and I let David convince me that you were the problem when really—" She paused. "When really, I was just afraid I wasn't enough." I reached across the space between us and took her hand. "You are enough. You've always been enough, and I'm sorry if I ever made you feel otherwise." That session was the turning point. The conversations got easier after that. Sarah started calling me again, tentatively at first, then more regularly. She invited me to Emma's school play without my asking. She let me take both kids for an overnight visit. David and I would probably never be close, but he started to thaw too. I think he saw that the kids were happier with me back in their lives, and even he couldn't argue with that. Now, 6 months later, standing in my kitchen with my grandchildren, covered in flour and surrounded by the smell of baking cookies, I thought about what this whole ordeal had taught me. I'd learned that love sometimes means fighting, not against the people you love, but for them, for the relationships that matter. I'd learned that silence isn't always golden. Sometimes staying quiet and accepting injustice doesn't keep the peace. It just lets the injustice continue. I'd learned that the legal system, for all its flaws, can sometimes protect the vulnerable, even when the vulnerable are the relationships between grandparents and grandchildren. But most of all, I'd learned this. Family is worth fighting for. Not with anger or bitterness, but with determination and love. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stand up and say, "I matter. My love matters. And I won't let you erase that. The cookies came out of the oven perfect, golden brown with melty chocolate chips. Emma and Jacob each grabbed one, too hot but unable to wait, blowing on them dramatically. "These are the best cookies in the whole world," Emma declared, like she did every time. "That's because they're made with love," I told her, like I always did. And this time, I added silently, love that refused to give up. If you're facing a similar situation, whether as a grandparent, parent, or someone caught in family conflict, remember this: relationships worth having are worth protecting. Don't be afraid to seek help, whether through counseling, mediation, or if necessary, the legal system. And if this story touched you, let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from today? Your story matters too, and you're not alone.